Robert Francis Prevost was born in November 1955 in Chicago, Illinois, to a modest family. His mother a nurse, his father a former civil rights activist. Though raised in the American Midwest, his heritage extended across the Atlantic to Senegal. His grandfather, Isaac Prevost, had come to the United States in the early 20th century, carrying with him the strength and trauma of Africa's colonial past. At family gatherings, young Robert heard stories of resistance and hope, of ancestors who survived slavery and drought with their dignity intact. Unlike other children fascinated by toys or cartoons, Robert was drawn to justice. He devoured books about leaders like Martin Luther King Jr. and Oscar Romero, men who had dared to speak against cruelty. He felt called not only to faith but to action. After studying philosophy and theology, he joined the Order of St. Augustine and asked to be sent wherever the world's wounds were deepest. That path led him to Peru. He arrived in Chilicanas, a small town in the arid north of the country, unsure of what to expect. He was a foreigner, an outsider with imperfect Spanish and a background worlds apart from the people he aimed to serve. Yet he didn't come to preach grand sermons, he came to listen. He listened to farmers driven off their land by mining conglomerates, to women suffering domestic violence, to children denied education and opportunity. Over time, trust blossomed. He walked dusty paths with the poor, ate their food, sat with them through illness and struggle. He spoke out against evictions, negotiated between feuding groups, and built bridges others had long abandoned. In the eyes of the people, he became more than Padre Roberto. He became a voice for the unheard. When threats came, he didn't leave. When authorities tried to silence him, he wrote to international rights groups. "If we walk away," he noted in his journal, "we walk away from Christ." News of his courage spread beyond the desert. He was invited to speak at global conferences on justice and peace, his sandals often more worn than the carpets he walked. He remained grounded, constantly returning to Peru between trips. "The priest is not a prince," he told reporters. "He is a servant who kneels beside the suffering." In 2014, Pope Francis appointed him Bishop of Chiclayo and later entrusted him with leading the Vatican's dicastery for bishops. Some were surprised. Robert had never courted power. But his deep integrity, clarity of thought, and unwavering commitment to the poor made him a natural choice in a church searching for moral clarity. In private meetings, he was candid about reform. He urged transparency, demanded accountability for clergy abuse, and supported greater roles for women in the church. He called on the church to stop criminalizing LGBTQ+ people and to begin walking with, not over, those who had long felt excluded. In 2023, he took a sabbatical and journeyed to Senegal. In the village of St. Louis, he visited the land of his grandfather and was welcomed as a long-lost son. Under a great baobab tree, elders performed a traditional blessing, naming him Bombarangeli, the dove of returning light. There, Robert wept, feeling at once found and rooted. His African heritage was no longer an echo, it was a guide. 2 years later, the world was fraying at the seams. Conflict raged from Ukraine to Africa, and climate disasters grew more deadly. The church too stood at a crossroads, split between reformers and traditionalists. When Pope Francis resigned in 2025, the conclave to elect his successor convened under a heavy cloud of uncertainty. Robert, now a cardinal, had no intention of becoming pope. But among the cardinals, his name kept surfacing, whispers of his integrity, his global perspective, his courage. On the 4th day of the conclave, white smoke rose. Habemus Papam. He chose the name Leo XIV, honoring Pope Leo XIII, a historic champion of workers' rights. "This is not about me," he told a close friend. "This is about where the church needs to go." His papacy began not with ceremony, but with a gesture, visiting a migrant camp outside Rome and washing the feet of refugees, Christian, Muslim, and atheist. Cameras flashed, but the moment was not for show. "The church cannot preach Christ while ignoring those crushed under the weight of greed and war," he said. "Our credibility lies not in doctrine alone, but in our compassion." He issued an encyclical titled Laudate Vox, Praise the Voice, condemning silence in the face of injustice. He overhauled Vatican finances, sold and used properties, and diverted funds to education programs for girls. He created an interfaith council with women and laypeople given full voting rights. In private, he encouraged bishops to be bold. Be bridges, not barricades. His papacy brought hope, but also backlash. Some conservative factions accused him of straying too far from tradition. Protesters stood outside St. Peter's Square, denouncing what they called a socialist pope. Leo XIV did not retaliate. He met critics with dignity and dialogue. "You fear I will change the church," he once told a skeptical archbishop. "I fear the church will fail to change the world." He traveled extensively, visiting war zones, flood-stricken islands, refugee camps. In Nigeria, he brokered a peace summit between Christian and Muslim leaders that ended years of bloodshed. In Myanmar, he knelt beside displaced Rohingya families and offered them more than blessings. He offered resources and continued advocacy. His voice became a global one, not just for Catholics, but for the voiceless everywhere. The church began to transform. Young people returned, inspired by a pope who marched with them. Women led diocesan offices. Abuse survivors received justice. Interfaith harmony bloomed in places once known only for conflict. In 2035, on the 10th anniversary of his papacy, Pope Leo XIV returned to Chulacanas. The town had changed, but the spirit remained. He was greeted by old friends, former students, and children of those he had once helped. They bowed before him, but he gently raised them to their feet. "No one bows to me," he smiled. "We bow only to the Christ within us." That night, a young girl gave him a drawing. It showed a figure in white robes standing at the edge of a cliff, holding out his arms to people of every race, lifting them up. On the back, she had written, "Gracias por ser nuestra voz." "Thank you for being our voice." In that moment, everything made sense. His childhood questions, his long journey across continents, his years of sacrifice, it had all led to this, lifting others, even when the world preferred they stay down. Robert Prevost, now Pope Leo XIV, was not perfect. He had doubted. He had lost battles. But he had never stopped believing in the transformative power of love lived boldly. Born in America, rooted in Africa, forged in Peru, crowned in Rome, but belonging above all to humanity. When the bells of St. Peter's rang late that evening, they didn't just ring for a pope. They rang for the triumph of the voiceless.